Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. Welcome back, Aspire Leaders, to a wonderful guest, one that's been on the podcast. I don't know, Evan, you might be the winner here of being on the podcast the most of any other guest. He is amazing. He is leading out in Virginia as a principal and has a brand new book out with Corwin called Aiming High, and I can't wait to dive into this topic. Evan, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Josh, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And, I'd have to think about that, how many times I've been on your podcast. It's kind of like Saturday Night Live. Like if they've hosted it a certain amount of time, you get like a certain status.
Yes.
So I'm waiting. Maybe we'll figure that out.
I think they get a jacket on that show now. So
they do. Yeah.
I'll be sending that in the mail. It'll be
the Aspire T-shirt. Right, absolutely. Absolutely. But hey, I really appreciate the opportunity to get together, the opportunity to have a conversation. As you know, I am a huge fan of your podcast, and I share your podcast every opportunity that I have, whether it's on social media, but also with people that I work with, because it is just a wonderful way to instantly access professional development on demand, 100% free, anytime that you want it. You've interviewed several hundred people now, I believe, and again, I'm just excited to be here today. So thanks.
You are actually episode 192, so yeah, I'm almost getting to 200 episodes of, and that's just the interviews. Thankfully, I've had some, other bonus materials and had a chance to work with Jeff Gargis doing the Aspire Mailbag, and then working with Sarah Johnson with the Aspire to Lead episodes also. So yeah, a lot of fun, and it's always a great time to speak with you, Evan. For those who potentially, are hitting the podcast for the first time and they don't know about your background, do you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I started in education almost 30 years ago as a language arts teacher, and was a language arts teacher, a history teacher, team leader, department chair, and was fortunate to be able to get an administrative job in the late 1990s, and moved into the principal position, and been fortunate to stay in the principal position ever since. I really did not, and I certainly don't have anything negative about people that aspire, no pun there, to move into central office positions, but it wasn't for me. I've always been very happy being at the building level, and I am completing my 24th year as a building level principal.
Wow.
And yeah, it's great. And, and along the way, I've been fortunate to meet a lot of nice people through social media, you of course being one of them, and have opportunities to write a few books and opportunities to speak a little bit and do a TEDx talk. So really some nice opportunities that have come my way, but it's really because of the excellent people that I've met and the support and encouragement that I've had along the way.
Evan, what number book is this? Because I feel like every year I feel like you have another text out there.
Yeah, this is number 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Written 5. Thank you very much. Every time I write a book, I say I'm not writing another book, and then I write another book.
I totally understand that after going through Aspire to Lead. I definitely understand that. But I don't know about you, but I'm starting to get the itch again. So is that how it is for you? You go through the writing process and then feel like I'm getting the itch to do it again?
Yeah, it is a little bit. I mean, for me, it's very hard for me to write if I don't feel that I have something that I need to say. Mm-hmm. So the itch kind of comes in tandem with getting an idea or having something in my mind that I think might be helpful to other people, and that gets me motivated to sit down and think about framing up a book and start writing again. So I don't fully have that itch right now, but I can say that it always revisits, and I'm sure it'll happen here at some point soon. I'm a huge fan of your book. Loved reading your book, actually.
Thank you.
And look forward. So if you've got the itch, that's great. So you can take the baton there, and I'll look forward to reading your work when it comes out.
Well, I want to dive into your brand new book, Aiming High. I got a little glimpse of this text before it came out and absolutely love the book. And if you don't mind, I'd love to start digging into some of the chapters.
Yeah, we can do whatever you like. Thank you.
Awesome. So first topic was redefining instructional leadership. And this is a topic that I've been really interested in lately, probably the last couple months, because I'll give him a shout out. Danny Bauer sent out a newsletter that I've subscribed to, Better Leaders, Better Schools, and he had a news clipping of instructional leadership, and it said that principals only are in the classroom on average 12% of the school year. And I started to think about it and started to kind of reflect on my own practices, and I was thinking, yeah, I would love to be in the classroom as much as possible. But when I started to really think about it, I was thinking that I was probably less than 12% this last school year. And I'm curious on just what you think the role of the instructional leader should be at the principal level or the assistant principal level, and how do we kind of fix what the current model looks like if 12% is really the average in the nation?
Yeah, I think that, I speak to a lot of administrators. I know you do too. And I've never met anyone who says, hey, I only want to be in a classroom 5% of the time.
Right.
I mean, everyone wants to be in the classroom more. The problems that you run into is the job is unpredictable.
Yep.
And sometimes with the best intentions, you can come in with saying, hey, I'm going to be in classrooms today, and then something comes up and you're not able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I find that I'm in classrooms more if I intentionally put into my calendar, specific notations that I need to be in classrooms on these days, because otherwise it really can slip away. And I think the other thing is, as you dive deeper into that, is what does it mean to be in a classroom? So does it mean, having your hands in your pocket and standing in the back of the room and grinning like a Cheshire cat and then walking out? Or does it mean that you're in there, I'm just giving one obviously extreme example there on the left side, but on the other side, does it mean going into classrooms with some intentionality? Some intentionality that can be born out of initiatives that the school is focused on, or particular objectives that a team may be working on. So there's an opportunity to provide feedback and give some good specific praise and potentially ask some questions about things also. So I think it's getting into classrooms, and it's getting into classrooms with some intentionality, but also intentionality that the people that you're observing know why you're in the room. And you and I have talked about this before, but especially if a new principal just is in classrooms and no one has any idea why they're in the classrooms, and there's no follow-up after that, that can be born out of good intentions, but it can hurt trust and relationships within the building and actually cause harm, even though a person might be thinking that they're doing something that's good. And I think the other piece that's important, and I know we've talked about this too, Josh, is, I think it's nice to get into classrooms and actually get involved. So learning alongside, with the kids, if kids are doing a science experiment, partaking in that with them, or if kids are doing, reading activity, partaking in that, so kids can see that, that you're, as an administrator, interested in their learning also. I think it sends a strong message.
So you also talk about, in this chapter, about leading a learning community, and then also in another chapter you talk about supporting students and staff through professional development. So I think this is such a huge topic for our leaders that are listening, because as you know, there are a lot of jokes about the staff meetings and how, don't ask a question at the end of the staff meeting because you don't want to be there any longer and you want to run out of the building as quickly as possible. And I'm just wondering, what are some things that you've done within your own experience as a principal to lead learning communities, but then also create professional development that's going to be beneficial where the staff wants to stay to learn?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that there's a weird dichotomy that exists sometimes in schools between what administrators or school leaders want to see in classrooms in terms of engaging, innovative, whatever word you want to put to it, instruction and learning environments, and what it looks like when the administrators are working with teachers. Mm-hmm. And often it's very different. Now, I would argue, and I argue in the book, that whatever the administrators expect to occur within the classroom, they should be modeling that when they work with teachers in faculty meetings or other types of committee experiences that they have. And one of the things that we like to see in classrooms is, we want to see voice, we want to see choice, we want learning to be relevant. And when those things occur, kids are more likely to engage in learning, they're more likely to learn. So the same thing with professional development, and we can go down that road a little bit. If staff see relevance in professional learning, if they think that it may make their life a little easier, if they think that it will improve learning for kids, they're probably a lot more likely to be a part of that because they're going to be committed to it. And you can't mandate good professional development. You can make people do things, and they'll sit and they'll get their points if they're doing recertification points or things like that. But you don't have any ability to make adults care about something, and you really don't have a high ability to make kids care about things either. They need to be committed to something, and they need to want to be a part of it. Now, I would say that really effective schools have a high degree of collective efficacy within the building and within the actual school division. So that's the belief that everyone's kind of pulling in the same direction, that everyone believes that if they work effectively and follow best practice, there's a very high likelihood that all kids can find success. If people are believing that, they will in turn be interested in professional learning if it's relevant to them, because it's going to help sustain their personal sense of efficacy that they can make a difference for kids. The best professional learning is ongoing. So it's relevant, it means something to the people that are receiving it, and it is something that is catered to them and continues throughout the year. That's not a lot different than what I would say about what's good personalization of learning within a classroom. It's going to be relevant for kids. It's going to be something that's ongoing and something that they'll tap into, as they move throughout the year. The worst, again, so on the flip side of that, where it goes wrong is just the mandating of things and the initiatives that don't mean anything to anyone. When that happens, people get pessimistic or they get sarcastic. Here we go again. This too shall pass. We've heard all of those things.
Sure.
And they've always existed in schools, and they still do. But I think when it's done with some good intentionality and it's modeled well by the administrators, I think really good things can happen in schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. The compliance piece versus finding value within the topic that you're learning.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. And, and it exists a lot, and it exists in different ways, So, I mean, there's classrooms, obviously not in your school, not in my school, where educators may believe that they can demand compliance from kids by threatening to fail them.
Yeah.
Or giving them zeros. And all that will do is turn kids off. And, middle school, it tends to increase. It either encourages kids to completely disengage and fade away in the woodwork, or to act out, and that can be, an igniter to more behavioral challenges that exist within a building.
Yep. Well, that kind of leads me to the next topic, because when you're talking about students and, the compliance piece and potentially turning them off, the other chapter I want to talk about was building trust and relationships. And I love this chapter because you actually break it down into two sections. You've got into the connecting piece, and then you've got the coaching piece. But then you don't stop there. You talk about the connection with students, the connections with teachers and families, but then also the coaching piece. And I thought that was a really fun way to present that, because I think of certain topics as far as coaching students. That's easy. We do that every day as an administrator due to their decision making. Same with teachers, but I didn't think of coaching as far as families. So obviously families are such a huge part of a school community. What are you doing to connect with families within your school, but then also how are you coaching them also?
Well, thank you for your words, first of all. I think sometimes, and I felt throughout my career, there's certain things that educators or I at times have been presumptive about. So presumptions some simple ones are like all kids like know how to take notes, like right. The teacher who's like frustrated, like, kids aren't taking notes, like I don't understand, and you're like, well, have you taught them how to take notes? No. Some kids are very good at organizing information naturally or intuitively. Some kids are not. Studying, no one studies for the test. Okay. Well, have you taught them some strategies of how to study? And sometimes the answer is no. So the same thing with families. You don't have to pass a test to have a child, and you don't have to go take a course to have a kid. I've never, I've been a principal for a long time. Like, I don't find parents who are like, hey, my goal is to be really bad. Like, I want to be like a really bad parent.
Nope.
Any more than I don't find teachers who say things like, hey, every day I come into work and I'm setting the bar low. Like, I want to be like, I want to be bad. There's 40 people in this building. There's going to be one who's number 1, and there's someone who's number 40. And damn it, I want to be number 4. like no one does that.
No.
And so with parents, what I have found is we have a role to help them understand some things that are very important that they can support at home. And we need to help explain that to them, not in educationese, but in a way that's relevant to them and that makes sense. And so reading is a really good example. Kids need to read. And, we can move past all of the programs that are in schools, guided reading and, universal screeners and closed reading activities, all these things that schools do. But at the end of the day, I think Richard Allington said it best, for kids to become better readers, they need to read.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens sometimes with families is, they get busy and there's a lot of things that are competing with time. So I think it's important for schools to, I got back to school now as a good example,
Yep.
to be able to share information with families on the importance of independent reading, on how independent reading can make a difference. There's some really powerful statistics on that. Suggestions on having reading time at home. And you're not watching TV or playing games, but everyone's reading. How do you talk to your child about a book? What's a good book for your child? Like, how do you help them find a book that's relevant to them? How can you develop them as a reader? Because if kids become better readers, they're going to become more successful in school.
Oh, for sure.
I think that's a really good way to partner with families. Because sometimes in schools, we push a lot of stuff out. So you push out your newsletter, you push out your messengers to families. But engaging in the conversation where you have people at a back to school night and say, you know what, we're going to talk tonight on the importance of independent reading. And, not to make you feel bad if you're not doing enough of that home, but to help elevate your understanding of the importance of this and give some really good strategies of how we can partner, between the school, the teacher, and you, the parent, to get kids more engaged in reading, because it makes a difference. And here's some statistics to kind of show you what that means. And I would make those nice and simple, easy to understand, so people could see some relevance to that.
Yeah. And I want to expand on that topic because, you do have a chapter called Leading for Literacy. And obviously, that's a huge piece within your values as a principal. I know you've had multiple books talking about how important it is for students to read. And I think that's such a powerful message from day one to talk with your families about. But what are you doing within your campus to help students understand, the power of reading and how that can help them in all of their classes and really their life?
One of the things that my faculty actually did was, so when we started having these discussions, that some just basic presumptions that everyone was agreeing on, like, does everyone think kids need to read more? Yes, like everyone's going to say yes to that. But the question is how do you find time to do that? Now, it would be pretty silly, in my opinion, for any school to believe that, if you're telling all your kids to go home and read 20 minutes a night, that it's happening. It will happen typically with the kids that really love reading, and other kids will probably find reasons to not engage in reading. And then you can amp it up and make it even worse and say that, every time you read, you got to do your reading log, or you got to borrow dad's shoebox and make a diorama. And that'll really turn kids off of reading. So what my staff did was we looked at our schedule. We were on an A-B alternating block schedule. We had 90-minute blocks within the building. And since everyone kind of agreed with my statement there, take about 6 minutes off of each block and cut those 90-minute blocks down to 84 minutes and create a micro block, in the case of our building, between first and third block of about 25 minutes, where all kids are engaged in independent reading every day. And they're not only engaged, but the teachers are engaged in independent reading, because it's actually a really good thing for teachers to be reading alongside of kids in their classroom.
Yep.
And then in order to support that, we really looked at our budget and looked at funding, worked with our librarian, and worked with several different publishing companies to purchase more and more classroom libraries and books for our library to make sure that we're bringing in books that have varied reading ability ranges, but also books that kids find relevant. Kids are more likely to read a book if they see themselves in a character, or if it's something that relates to them. I can't make every kid in my building read Old Yeller. And I'm not knocking Old Yeller. It's a good book, and it was a good movie. Made me cry when I saw the movie. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have Old Yeller in school libraries, but we need other books also.
For sure.
That are relevant to kids that they can connect to.
Yeah, which is another piece of what you wrote about, which is books create access and equity. And I thought that was an interesting topic, and one that I think is something that we all need to review on our campus is, does all of our students have access to all educational material that they need to be successful, or like you said, material books that represent themselves?
Yeah, it's an important question to ask, and I think that there's some real delineations based off of the economy of families when it comes to that. Things are expensive. It's
Hmm.
expensive nowadays, and
Yep.
so the luxury of a family being able to spend a lot of money on books, if they're worried about putting food on the table, or paying rent, or making ends meet, is not really high. So there can be some real disadvantages between families that have means and families that don't have means. So the school becomes the the ability, the source to level that playing field. And that means that we have to look at budgets, and we have to have books available for kids, and we have to have kids have a lot of exposure to books
Hmm.
during the day. And what I would say, and you and I have not talked about this, but when I was in grad school, I was really impacted by Jonathan Kozol's book, Savage Inequalities. And so, for anyone who hasn't read the book, I'd recommend it. It speaks about the inequities in public education across America all along economics, and the advantages of people that live in certain zip codes and the access that they have,
Yep.
the disadvantages of people that come from poverty or that live in generation poverty, and in many cases, the lack of access that they have. Now, what I have seen is during the pandemic, I've seen those things even increase even more.
Yeah.
So we had more and more kids that were disengaging and disconnecting from education, but we also had kids who were very engaged because their families had structures at home, or one parent was at home all the time and was able to provide a tremendous amount of support for their kids. So it's not only this, the economic disparities that have existed between wealthy and people that do not have that level of means, but it's been it's been made much larger by the isolation that many kids had experienced during the pandemic and the lack of learning that occurred, and also on the other end, the highly catered learning that some kids received when they were connected to families just by the luck of choosing the right parents, right? Which of
Yeah.
course you can't do, and that creates just different advantages for them.
For sure.
So the school needs to take a really good look at access, at equity, at cultural diversity, and what is the school doing to know the kids that are in the building and to meet their needs.
Yeah, I love it. Evan, I'll have to check that book out. So I'll definitely be reading that. And
It's a
I can
powerful
even
book.
link that in the show notes for our listeners.
Yeah, that book was written many years ago, but it still is incredibly relevant, and
Mhm.
maybe even more so right now. I mean, it's a powerful message. It's a message that I think educators should think about.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
This book started off talking about the pandemic and how you had some reflections on you as a leader and how you wanted to redefine a lot of different things to make schools successful and leaders successful. So I'm curious on, now that we've gone through 2 really difficult school years, what was one thing that you learned the most to enhance your leadership skills?
That's a really good question. I think that it's not so much learned, it was more reaffirmed. I reaffirmed within myself that I can't carry the responsibility of feeling like I need to know everything and I need to have an answer to everything.
Yep.
But if I can get my really good people around me and we can problem solve and work together, we can do some pretty amazing things. And there were a lot of people that when the pandemic started, they would say things like, "Well, I didn't go to graduate school to learn how to manage a pandemic. I don't know how to do that," and of course I didn't either. But I think what you realize, a couple years later is we didn't need to. You just have to kind of go back to the core things that really define good leadership.
Yep.
Communication, collaboration, being a good listener, working with your team, sourcing your team, and extending grace, extending compassion, being optimistic, being positive. All of those things that we did learn in school, and that they work. And in retrospect, they work quite well during really challenging times.
Reaffirms the essential skills that we need to teach our students every day.
100%.
So check out Evan's new book, Aiming High. Phenomenal book. I'm holding it in my hands as we speak. Phenomenal text, like I said. So I'll have that in the show notes for everyone to check out. Definitely a lot of action steps in there, a lot of tips. lot of wisdom and resource for you, for any aspiring and current leader. And so, Evan, how can our listeners connect with you on social media?
Thanks, Josh. Thank you for your kind words. You can connect with me on Twitter at @eRobbPrincipal. And also, if you just put in Evan Robb, you can easily find me on LinkedIn and on Facebook also. I haven't delved into the Instagram world, and Josh, you remind me of that frequently. Maybe eventually I will.
That's my one goal, Evan. One goal.
Get on Instagram, absolutely. But I love to connect with people, and one thing that I can say is connecting on social media has allowed me to meet people that I would never normally meet. And so I love meeting people. I love connecting with people. And to anyone who's listening to this, who's thinking, well, I don't know, should I do that? My feeling is absolutely dive in. It's perfectly fine and perfectly safe. Just, make the decisions that are right for you professionally, protect your reputation, and connect with people that you're interested in.
Yeah, life changer with the expanding of social media and the PLN and learning from amazing leaders like yourself. And yeah, we would have never crossed paths without social media, and I consider you a mentor of mine, and I love our conversations. I have learned so much from you as a leader, as a human being. So, Evan, I'm honored that you have been on the podcast as many times as you have. And for my listeners, if you haven't listened to the previous episodes that Evan's been on, please make sure you do that. I promise you're going to get great value from listening to those episodes. And Evan, thank you so much again for being on the Aspire podcast.
Well, I appreciate being on the podcast, and as someone who's been in the business for 30 years, it makes me feel really good about potentially looking at opportunities after being in education, knowing that there are people like you who are so well-grounded philosophically and so committed to education to carry things on. It's a pleasure. I'm always connecting with you, Josh.